So as you can tell, we're starting these episodes without the music, without this highly produced kind of intro. We're just jumping in, we're having a conversation, and apparently that's kind of the new trend for 2025, as well as favoring the unfiltered and authentic content while ditching these highly produced episodes, video, audio, all that. So the question is, should your podcast be raw, unedited, or minimally edited and authentic? Or is it better to edit heavily, look and feel super polished and professional? Let's get into this. It's Profitcast. I'm the real Brian. Welcome, Seth.
Thank you. I'm Seth Silvers. Happy to be here to talk more podcasting and also to provide some... I think that there's a lot of different viewpoints about this conversation. So this is less a here's the answer and more here's the spectrum and let's figure out what makes sense for you.
Yeah, agreed. And the thing is with trends, and we talk about this, the moving target, which I kind of think trends are kind of a moving target anymore. It's kind of like, ooh, who likes this? Who wants this? Whatever. I do feel like you kind of need to go with what makes the most sense for you. And I've got a couple of ideas and perspectives. And I know, Seth, you've got a couple of ideas and perspectives. Some of them we'll agree with, some of them will contrast, just to kind of give a little bit of a perspective on what, again, might work the best for you. I was going to share one thing here with radio and in-person events, which I did. That was before podcasting. That's what I did. I got into live radio. That was my dream as a kid. I wanted to be a morning show disc jockey. And then I got into radio and radio was dying, but I still did it anyway. And so everything that we did was live, everything. We didn't edit anything. You got in the air, and if it was good, it went out there. And if it was bad, it went out there. And oh, well, you messed up, you moved on, right? Same with live person events. If I'm doing a private event or if I'm interviewing actors on stage, in front of 20,000 people or something, you mess up, it's out there. It's just the way it is. And so you learn to be better. And I have this little joke too, where I used to say, become a one-take wonder. Because, if you're in a recording studio, it's a lot easier and it's a lot simpler and cheaper to get one take and get it done and move on than sit there and do 50 million takes. And I think too, one of the things I've learned is when I came to podcasting, everybody was editing. Everybody was doing that. And I'm just like, this is so foreign to me. Everything I did was live. I tried to do as much live with the Rodecaster Pro, for example, and playing the music when I've got that, if we do that kind of stuff, just do it all live so that we don't have to do as much in post-editing. And what was really funny is that these people would take 20, 30, 40 takes because they kept messing up. And if there's one thing I've learned from podcasting and even doing music is that the more takes that you make, the worse you get. So it's better to just get it done, do it right. And if you mess up, it's okay. Unless it's this absolute train wreck, it's okay to just move on. Don't worry about editing and that kind of thing. Coming to this highly edited medium was a very foreign thing for me. And for YouTube, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Seth, but for YouTube, I think YouTube has just gotten completely out of control with this high level of editing. It's almost like a full video production, and you either have to hire somebody and pay a lot of money to get this ridiculous full-on video production, or you've got to learn how to do it and spend a ton of money on all this equipment and then just spend hours and hours. In fact, I follow these people. They spend a day recording, and they spend 6 days editing one video. And I thought, that's not a very good return on investment here. I mean, okay, fine, the videos are beautiful, right? But does it really matter that much? And I mean, those are the questions that I keep asking. And so when I see this trend in 2025 that viewers are craving more authentic and less or even non-edited content, just get in front of the camera and just talk, have a relationship with your viewer, your listener, your audience, and that's it. Yeah. I saw that and I thought, that's like a weight taken off me right now. I mean, I value editing, but it allows me to create more content. I could spend 6 days creating content instead of 6 days editing, which I think that's more important and more valuable down the road for those of us who are in the content creation space and for those businesses and entrepreneurs that, well, you've got to put out content to get your message out there and to grow your business. So I don't disagree with the editing. I feel like there are some things that should not go out there. The one danger with saying I'm not going to edit is that you might say something that you might regret down the road, or maybe it is actually detrimental to your company, like an NDA thing or something like that. Or it could be just, well, that wasn't the wisest thing in the world. In fact, I edited for a client that was bashing a spouse. I don't think this is a good idea. And this client thought it was hilarious. And I thought, but it makes you look kind of mean. And so I took that out, and it was funny in the moment, but it didn't come across that way. And I think the client finally got it and was thankful later that I took that out. And so I feel like there are just some things that are not beneficial to go out. And so it's okay to edit for those reasons. And so I do think that editing is a very important thing to do. But maybe what you need to do is look at editing for content more than editing for perfection and the perfect, polished looking and sounding kind of podcast episode. So those are some of my thoughts, but Seth, I wanted to hear your thoughts before I go into any concluding comments.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you hit it on the head right there when talking about we should be editing for the sake of content, not for the sake of perfection. Part of the reason I love podcasting is because of the authentic nature of it. Like, it feels conversational. It feels like a great way to learn, to educate, to be entertained. And what got me into it was kind of looking at the marketing world and looking at how businesses were communicating and realizing this doesn't feel very authentic. Like, it feels like it's really hard to stand out in an authentic way in how businesses are communicating. And so I felt like podcasting is a really, really good way to be able to connect more authentically. I do want to say, like, my perspective has actually shifted a little bit over the last year on this. I'm like more of a fan now of what I'd almost call like more surgical editing than I was a year ago. Okay. And I think we can kind of look at this in like some phases. Yeah. You know, I think when we kind of had like the podcast boom of COVID in 2020, tons of people started a podcast. I think one thing that people are forgetting that also blew up right before COVID is Clubhouse, where there was kind of this few month period where all of a sudden live, unedited audio that was not recorded, you had to be there live. Clubhouse blew up, and there was like a couple months right before COVID where that exploded. And when you look at podcasts statistics on when podcasts are started, there was actually a massive spike in the amount of podcasts that were started right before COVID. So that can't be attributed to the COVID boom. I think it's attributed to Clubhouse. We looked at that, and then all of a sudden you have all these podcasts that start where people are in their kitchen. They don't have a studio. There was a level of grace that people had for quality standards because that was what was possible in that time. I think people's perspective is shifting now. I think the like record on Zoom in your kitchen is not as well received now as it was 3-4 years ago. Yeah. And the other aspect with this is some of the shows that I'm working on where the video expression and the audio expression shouldn't match. With Profitcast, there's probably not going to be a lot of things where if you're listening, you're like totally missing out. Like, you know, maybe we have times where we're showing diagrams or different things, but there are some shows where that's a big deal. And I was editing one episode for a show, and it was primarily a video first piece of content. And so they were doing stuff on whiteboards, and they had an overhead camera that was looking at like piece of papers they were drawing on. So I was having to edit out a lot because that wouldn't make sense to a person who's listening, and it would actually diminish the experience. So the audio version of that episode was actually a lot less in duration. It was maybe like 5-10 minutes less because there were pieces that if I left them in, but they didn't have the visual context, then it actually wouldn't have made as much sense. I think that I'm beginning to get a little bit more bullish on really when you have the opportunity, which not everybody does, or when you have like the time or the budget, if you can look at the audio versus the video experience a little bit differently, then I think that is ideal. But that's not needed for the majority of shows of like what people are calling like chat shows where you and I are just talking. It's not really needed for a lot of things like this, but I think for a lot of brands where they're trying to take their overly produced YouTube videos and turn those into podcasts. If you're doing that, if you're taking something from YouTube and turning it into an audio episode, you're probably going to need to do like a little bit more editing to what I say is contextualize. Like you want something that's posted on a podcast platform to be contextualized to audio, and the same for video. I think that when we're listening to something, if you close your eyes and you just like sit in your room, you're going to notice more sounds. Like if you just sit there for 30 seconds, I would notice more noise in my room than I'm noticing right now with my eyes open, because right now I'm taking more things in, but it's different. And so you hear this with people that have lost their vision. Not their ear sight, their sound. Their level of hearing is increased.
I like ear sight, actually. That's really cool, actually, yeah.
That's great. A good example, too, is we see this with Daredevil. When Daredevil loses his sight, all his senses are coming. So I think something like a version of that happens when we're listening to a podcast, to where there's noises that happen, or there's maybe even mistakes. If somebody has a lot of like mouth noise or they sniff a lot, I might not notice that if I'm watching them.
True.
Because I see them sniff. Like even if you blew your nose right now, probably wouldn't think, I mean, I would probably be like, that's a little bit rude, but I wouldn't think too much of it because I'm watching you blow your nose. But if I wasn't watching you blow your nose and then somebody just blew their nose in the middle of a conversation, obviously it's an extreme example. Probably not going to blow your nose on a podcast episode, but it would be way more confusing.
Some people do.
I know. So I think that's kind of where like my perspective on it has been. I think ultimately you have to look at what's your editing capacity. Like, do you actually have the budget, the margin, the time to have somebody that's thinking through these things? And also, what style of show do you want for your show? Does it make more sense for your audience to have a light conversation? Or are you trying to do something that's like more heavily produced? Like, what fits with your brand, and where your brand is at is going to probably make a different impact. I probably have different expectations for like Apple or like a Fortune 500 company than somebody who's much, much smaller.
And you're right about the video versus the audio thing too. You do create that theater of the mind, you know, with audio. And I've talked about this before too, that body language makes up most of our communication. But when you take that away, now it's what you hear. It's the voice inflections. It's the performance. It's like you said, the mouth noises, and the people do that all the time, by the way. Or they cough right in. It's like, use your mic, you know, when you need to do something, back off or mute your mic or something. It's just little things like that you just do. And, you know,
I think a lot about the retention of an episode. Like on the next episode, we're talking about growth.
Yeah.
And I think a big thing that prevents people from, like, if people aren't making it through your episodes, they're probably not going to enjoy your episode enough to share it, which is how your show grows. Some of those little details in editing, I do think that they prevent people from listening on. I think that there's some, I don't have any data points to show this, but I think like if I'm listening to something, I'm like, man, they just left all the mistakes in. Like, I'm probably less likely to do it. Again, it depends on the genre. If I'm sitting there listening to a conversation, then it's different. But if my expectation is this is like if I was listening to something by NPR, or I was listening to an episode of like How I Built This with Guy Raz, a heavily produced show, and there was a lot of mistakes, I would be like, oh, like they're going downhill. Like NPR's, they need some editors, because that's the expectation they've built for us. If I'm sitting down listening to a conversation between, I don't know, Mark Cuban and Alex Hormozy or somebody, then it's gonna be like, oh, this is a conversation. I'm gonna be looking at it through that lens.
Yeah, you're right. So it's the style of the video, or the style of the episode, whether it's video or audio or both. Yes, if it's a conversation, more natural is fine. And again, I think there's a room for different types of videos. You could have a more polished video if that's what it's for. It's a short form, it's a polished video, it's solo, I'm talking directly to you. You can make that super clean and polished. But then if you're having a conversation between people, or if you're just having an authentic, let's just have a sit down and talk kind of thing, that can be, so it also depends, I think, on the style of the episode that you're trying to bring, which could vary within your podcast. It doesn't have to be the same thing all the way across. But I agree with you that when it comes to editing, in fact, I was thinking about this when you have a conversation with somebody. You don't edit your conversation. You just sit down and talk. It's completely natural. Again, what's said is said, and that's it. You move on. But I don't know if anybody does this, but I do tend to sort of, as I'm talking, I watch the body language. Are they interested? Are they engaged? Or are they starting to kind of wander? Their eyes are wandering. Their mind, you're starting to look like they're not paying attention anymore. In which case, that's a great thing for a podcast episode, is that if you do that in real life, chances are you will do that on a podcast, in which case it's probably a good idea to edit down so that you don't lose your listener or your viewer, like you just said. And so I think, again, it just goes back to, I think content is probably one of the most important things to edit for. Yeah. And that's probably one of the things that editors do the least. They edit the mistakes out and they edit for polish, which is good. But I think content is what gets missed, and in fact, I've talked to a lot of editors. Oh yeah, I don't edit for content. I don't want to do that. I don't know how to do that. I wouldn't even know what to do for this client because they're the experts. I'm not. I'm like, yeah, but you should be, or you should be able to know enough to know I'm going to take this out, or I'm going to ask my client if I should take this out or not. And so as a business owner, as an entrepreneur doing a podcast, it's essential to be thinking about, should I have said that? Or, you know what, let's take this out. Think about that as the host too. I still love the idea of little to no editing in general because it removes that barrier. A new entrepreneur or business that wants to start a podcast, it's daunting. There's a lot that goes into it. And you think about, well, if I've got to do this highly produced show and I've got to have multiple camera shots and I've got to, do B-roll and I've got to do all this extra music and all this, it's like, this is going to be an expensive hire if I hire out an editor or a producer, or I've got to figure all this stuff out. Forget it. It's too much. It's this high level of entry that you're like, forget it. So it lowers the entry to be able to say, let's just get content out there. Let's do the best we can, but let's go with that authentic approach Well, let's own that. And then we don't have to worry about it looking so polished, because that's the expectation that you're setting, as long as the content is good and you're keeping people engaged, because you are a human being talking to another human being. And I just love that. So yeah, does editing make content better? Absolutely it does. And it can. And I think it's good to clean those things up. But also authenticity is essential. And especially now, more and more as we're seeing and hearing people talking about this, because the generations are getting kind of tired. In fact, I was reading something about with the recent election, and how a lot of the candidates were actually choosing to go on podcasts more than traditional media for the first time in history. And I thought that was really cool. So there is something to be said about this medium where people really just want to have a real humanistic approach. And so which option is better? Honestly, I'm going to recommend a balanced approach of both. I think edit for content, especially clean up the messes as necessary, but keep it authentic. Keep it authentic regardless. And if you don't want to put some crazy production onto it, then don't. But if you do, fine, go for it. It's really up to you on this one, but I hope we've given you enough information to kind of make a good decision for yourself on, should we do this or this? Should we take a balanced approach, or should we do this for this video and this for this video or episode, whatever that is you're looking at?
When you're looking at this from your brand's perspective, or if you're like a business looking at this, I do think that it has to be looked at through the lens of your other brand content. And so you have to look at like what's the norm amongst your audience. And what we're not giving everybody permission to do is to put a couple mics in your garage with your buddies and some beers and just talk and then publish it and expect that people will listen. Because I often hear people they're like, oh, you're in podcasting. Like, oh, I have something to say. And that's cool. Yeah. We have to remember that your show still needs a premise, and it still has to be good, and it still has to solve problems for specific people or entertain a specific group of people. So those things are still true. So this doesn't mean, hey, just hit record on your conversation and then publish. You still have to put in the work of crafting a unique and memorable show. And I think especially on the business side, if a brand or business is looking to start a podcast, I think it's even more important that there is an enterprise. I don't really want to listen to friends ramble. I certainly don't want to listen to a company ramble. And a company rambling is certainly not going to get me to buy their product. Mm-hmm. And so I think
that's a good point.
We still have to approach, okay, we need a premise for this show. What makes this show unique and good? For the genre of this show, of Profitcast, when we were talking about this, we don't want it to feel like we are teaching you necessarily. We want it to feel like, hey, we're both working with businesses in a bunch of different varieties on how they can use and grow podcasting. So we want to share what we're learning, and also we want to bring other people that we can learn from them. So we want this to feel more like a conversation about growing a podcast for a business that you can step into. And so that's why for this, it's okay, with that in mind, let's have it be a little bit more conversational of a feel. And so you still have to think through those things.
Yeah.
One thing that we are working on and going to continue to work on is what we call the business podcast roadmap. What we are creating here is the go-to, kind of the most valuable resource for businesses wanting to launch and grow a podcast. This is where we're sharing the same information that we're sharing with consulting clients and production clients. And we're just making it free because we think that more businesses podcasting in better ways is good for the industry. So if you are interested, you can go to businesspodcastroadmap.com, and that is where you can find all of the resources for free. And every month we're adding new stuff to it. So every month we're either updating, maybe based on learnings, and we'll publish those learnings and say, hey, we changed our mind. Maybe a year from now, Brian and I will believe that you should be editing out every other word in your podcast. And if we do believe that, then we will let you know in the podcast roadmap.
It's a fantastic resource. And it is funny because, my editing of the past has always been a very detailed oriented. I mean, it's I do edit out every single mistake, every single crutch word, and I edit every single one of those things out. It's incredibly tedious, but it makes it sound excellent. But that's been my question is that necessary anymore too? So yeah, it's maybe it will be in a year. So we'll figure it out.
I'm switching. I used to be the opposite and not want to edit much out. And now when I'm editing out a lot more of that stuff. So we're just trading places.
Yeah,
so.
this is a great resource. And Seth, thanks for mentioning it. And of course, if you'd like to get in touch with us, by the way, we'll have all of our links in the description on YouTube and in the podcast app and all that. If you want to get in touch and figure out what we're doing with our companies, Real Brian Media and Story On and all that. We'd love to hear from you. And if you have anything you want us to talk about here on the show, any questions, let us know. We would love to answer that here on the show. But thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you in the next episode.